Hello everybody, today I'm going to take this indoor security camera and I will try to apply my Japanese design guidelines in order to create a new cam with the Japanese aesthetic. So if you're interested about the process, how I get there, what these design guides are, and what the result is, if I succeeded, then stick around and stay tuned. Thank you, let's go. This is the camera that I found on Amazon, right? It's from Blink, a mini. I think it's an old version. There's probably a newer one available at the market at the moment. But basically, it's a very compact security cam with a USB-A mini port. And yeah, it's rather cheap at the moment. So maybe you should get one if you're interested. And here on the right, you see the reference model that I made in order to have a better way to compare things. I did do the radius a little bit too small compared to the real one on this picture. And if you look at the action cam, these are the base dimensions according to Amazon. 50 by 49 by 36, almost square in dimension. Then we have a ball joint here. Then we have a cap on top of the stand that covers basically the screwing holes, but also the cable. Then we have, let's say, two status LEDs with different color capabilities. Then we have a microphone. We have the camera lens itself. Then there's a infrared lens at the top of the front side. And we have a speaker outlet also at the top. So you can give or speak through the camera, but also record audio from the camera. And then we have on two sides, at the bottom and the back, we have a port, I think it's a bayonet system, to basically attach the foot to the camera itself, right? So this is the base reference that we are working with. And you can already see that the front surface is more or less melting outward and is at maximum peak in the middle. We have, let's say, the shell core design. And now I want to apply the Japanizing beam, right? So here are the guidelines that I identified in one of my previous videos. So if you haven't looked at that, you can check it out. But basically what I found is that something gets to be understood as Japanese design if there are cultural associations, either in the surrounding and context or within the product design itself. There's reliable use of tactile materials, and also honest and authentic materials, clear functionality, natural and reduced colors. An appreciation for objects is recognizable in the way things are designed. In composition, there's often use of negative space and asymmetry and imbalance. There is usually some sort of reference to nature, either in shape or in material. Graphics are more or less reduced, and the forms are very simple, pure, and more soft and rounded. And even additive elements, they grow out organically out of the main volume, if you will. At least that's the characteristics that I identified, right? So if you look at the camera as it is now, I reveal the changes that I intend to make in my first draft of concepts, right? So I would change the material to look less artificial, give it some structure, maybe some speckle, make it more natural in its color and tone. Try to find ways to integrate things more organically, naturally, right? There's very sharp edges or corners between the stand and the main body that we could make smoother or more organic, but also the way the front or the core is working with the shell. There's like, it works with high contrast. Maybe there's also another way for us to integrate it more organically and naturally. And overall, I mean, it's already heavily rounded, but we can apply more soft roundedness to the overall shape in all directions even, and see if that will make the appearance more Japanese in the aesthetic. All right, so with that in mind, I went ahead and started the ideation process. So here, I think in roughly half an hour, I was sketching several ideas. I started with the base shape, made it more round, as I mentioned just now, right? Kept everything else more or less intact. So there's a subtle integration of the camera lens part going inward instead of outward, and it's from one material. Then I have many ideas which are based on more cylindrical or even pill-shaped designs, some interesting alternatives to the stand and the way the thing is tiltable, right? Other mechanisms, other geometries that I think could work or could not work. So here I highlighted the aspect that I find interesting and want to pursue further in the concepts, right? So for once, this is the safe selection of concepts, right? So I stick as close as possible to the original, but I do apply the things that are easily applicable and still have the biggest impact, like the rounding of things, the integration, organic integration of features, right? But I also do like this one here at the bottom. It's a little bit more retro futurism, I would say. It gives me Dragon Ball Z Capsule Corp vibes, but I find the aesthetic interesting and still feels to me more Japanese. Then I indicated here that I like the base, the way it works. So it basically is a plateau where the whole thing is resting on top instead of like a pillar that is just connected on a single point, right? Then I also find funny that maybe I can work with completely different ways that are more clearly indicating the movability and functionality of the camera itself, rather than just having a ball joint that is hidden underneath the body, right? Being more open and transparent and honest with that type of feature. And I looked at these images that are generated with AI that are supposed to represent modern Japanese living spaces. And I tried to see if they would work with these spaces, if I can imagine these concepts there and what I would have to do in terms of materials, also proportions and shaping, finer shaping to make it fit in these spaces here, right? And I think that is really helpful because it's very contextual, the understanding of an indoor cam, which I think is really relevant to also consider the space it will actually end up in and see if it makes sense in there or if it pops out strongly or if it is according to your intentions. Maybe if you want to have it pop, then that's good, right? Basically, I ended up with these 4 main directions. And I mean, some are pretty close to what they were in the initial sketch. I didn't want to spend too much time. I do think there is more refinement required. Actually, like the base is maybe a little bit short for many of these. The shaping, the draft angles and stuff. Also, the perspective is really wrong here. But hey, I think the idea is clear. And with that, I further moved on and basically modeled these geometries real quickly, roughly in 3D, and sought out different CMF boards that are also generated with Midjourney, right? But they do really, I think, inspire Japanese material honesty and tactility that I'm always referring to in these videos. The colors really work well, so I feel like they are a good starting point for how to actually color and materialize the concept that I have, right? So I have these in mind. Now I'm also just want to go through the concepts once more and show them in context, but also see things that didn't work out. Right, so overall I felt like this was very simple, clean and clear, right? But I also tried it with different shapes of the base, like a rounded square, for example, or I applied this wooden base idea here, but I don't know if you agree. To me, this didn't work at all. If you see it in context here, I feel like it works. It's not trying to hide itself, but it's not overbearing as well. It pops out, but I don't feel like it's aggressive. It's visible and it's supposed to be visible, right? So I feel like it does a good job in integrating the ideas and the meaning that I wanted to implement in here while remaining close to the original design intent. So as I already mentioned, I feel like it's much more robotic looking and more complex in the mechanisms. And here is an example where I try to keep the front more subtle compared to this very contrasting front. it didn't work. So I didn't like it at all. It worked much better if I keep the overall volume of the ball intact. And here in context, we see, I feel like it works still, right? AI did like exchange the glass with just plastic, but all right, I take it. I feel like this is something that would already exist even, because it's really playing with this eyeball metaphor, right? But I don't feel like it's breaking with the background a lot in this bright space. But I also feel like it's not very true minimalism. It's really more this retrofuturism, which is cool, which could also be Japanese, right? But it's just not the final look that I'm after. For the third one, I also have the feeling that this becomes more cute because it's a little bit more compact and airy. Like we have more space, we separate it a little bit from the platform that it's standing on, especially in the perspective shot here. The ratio feels more natural and nice. Here it feels a little bit like pressed together a little bit. So this is not what I'm after, right? So subtle changes and can have a huge impact. But the way it's represented on the right here, I think it feels natural. It also works well. The intent that I had with using the wood as a way to connect the security cam to the environment. So I think so far this and the first one are my strongest contenders. Then the other one, I feel like this could be a minion, right? It becomes more anthropomorphic in my understanding of it. I feel like a face now, suddenly it feels like a body. And it quickly becomes something more being wise. I like the color, but the limit in functionality that I see in this concept, the way it is represented here, is a deal breaker overall, right? And that also goes for the last one. Here I can imagine that it maybe swivels around the base. So this is stronger than the last one, I would say. But overall, I feel like this one has my vote for being the most Japanese out of these concepts, followed by this guy, and then we have this one. So let me know if you agree or if you have a completely different idea. Tell me also what you think about putting these in context. I used DALL-E, Bing image generator for that, but also here providing initial context, additional context also helps to elevate the feeling of this being a Japanese product overall, right? With the background, the architecture overall. I feel like all these things, they add to the experience of this being perceived as potentially Japanese design. So those were my overall concepts that I came out with, right? So what I felt helped a lot to change the overall appeal is the softness and the roundedness, right? I feel like compared to the original one, because these are much more rounded, they immediately go towards Muji. Also, the colors worked really well to give this a more Japanese direction than it would otherwise have. Wood, where possible, I felt also was like a nice little touch. But I also have to be honest and see that I'm not 100% sure if these would also be actually competitive in terms of price or functionality. I already said that the last two concepts, right, they are seemingly more static. Do they even allow for the functionality of rotation in, let's say, all directions? Or is it just rotation around an axis? And also in terms of price, these are already more components than we would have here. A sphere overall, you need like a mold that is a little bit more complicated than just like a empty cube shell, right? So all these things, they add costs. The base is also a plastic part here. And if we exchange this with wood, it might still be more expensive to do that wood thing than to do the plastic one. So I think price-wise, there is basically, it's really hard to get below what we have in the original reference. So that's something to have in mind. So maybe you can translate something into an aesthetic that you desire more, but it comes at a cost. All right, that was it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I was able to actually get like something that reflects Japanese design more closely than the original design. I hope that my design guidelines were also used appropriately by myself. But overall, I feel like I did get closer to the aesthetic that I'm looking for. And I hope you can also get something out of this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to follow and help me out there. Otherwise, have a nice day. See you around. Thank you.